Hello everyone, welcome to Homo Sapiens. Very exciting. Who have I got sitting with me today? It's none other than Dani St James. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming, babe. We're very, very excited to have you here. So one of the things we've been talking about, or I spoke about in the opening episode, and here's Dani. So this is the time to talk about it a bit further, is Homo Sapiens is coming back with activism in its heart. And we are setting up a fund to raise some money to buy trans people gender-affirming underwear through Dani's company that makes gender-affirming underwear. It's called Zoa.
Zoa, that's the one.
It does amazing things. So how would you describe that? It's
tucking underwear and swimwear, binders and packing underwear and packers. So we kind of cover every base for your underwear and swimwear needs as a trans individual.
So listeners, it's hello@homosapienspodcast.com if you want to write to us and register your interest that you would like to receive some of this underwear. What's the website for it? It's
Zoa.shop. That's it. Zoa.shop. Zoah. Yeah.
Which is your middle name, right?
It is. How did you know that?
I just know these things, Dani.
Yeah, it is my middle name. It's when I was choosing a name in my early 20s, my former middle name began with a Z, and I always really liked the way that it looked in my signature. And so, when I was changing it, I tasked my parents with finding a new middle name that wasn't Zoe or Zara and started with a Z. And it's got mixed origins. Depending on where you chase it back to, it's either got Greek or Arabic origins, and it either means peaceful or woman. And I thought that was kind of interesting. So, I think I've always been in dire need of being a little bit more peaceful. So I adopted Zoa.
Great. And so with the government rowing back all the things you need as a trans person, we're trying to step in and do our little bit, do what we can. So please help us raise money. That's what we're going to be doing. And we also did with Dani and Not a Phase, which we're going to talk about in a sec. We raised money with Erdem for Pride with this T-shirt that Erdem made. Erdem, the fashion designer, is what I'm talking about. Okay. So Dani, what's I've been asking everyone this because everyone is a multi-hyphenate. What's on your passport? How would you describe yourself?
I was straight away going to go female, I promise. How would I describe myself? I, as I'm sure many of the people that you've got co-hosting with you, as you say, wear many hats. I think first and foremost, I would put myself down, CEO of Not a Phase. We're a leading UK charity supporting trans adults. And then alongside that, I've got a really varied work life. I own a trans gender-affirming underwear and swimwear company. I co-own a swimwear brand with a friend of mine that won Love Island a couple of years ago, and I'm like the silent co-owner of it. And then I also have a really varied working life outside of that. I do a lot of public speaking. I've had a semi-successful modelling career at times. Done a little bit of everything,
When I put out on socials, what would people like us to talk about? One person said older trans people.
Yeah.
And then someone else said trans health, which is that's a broad statement. But I think it's really interesting to touch on both of those over the course of your time with us. You know what I mean?
Sure.
We're not going to cover it all today in any way. But it would be useful because there are so many facts flying around. If you wouldn't mind, and you can say no, by the way, but just outlining for listeners, where are we right now in terms of things that have been taken away and what is happening as a result of that? Rights that have been taken.
My goodness. Okay, well, the rights is an ongoing one. So I think we can probably circle back to that, although it could probably be not even an episode, a series in of itself. Okay, let's go for the health, the health as a broader topic. Speaking Only for trans adults, not for trans kids, because that's its own complete set of struggles that's separate to adults. The gendered healthcare services have been defunded systematically over the last 10 years and are now so overcrowded. There's such long wait lists that essentially it's a completely failed system. So to give you some sort of give you sort of some sense of the gravity behind how failed the healthcare system is currently, these are rough estimates. If I, as a trans individual, came out today in central London. London's the important part because that's the most oversubscribed area. And I was lucky enough to have a GP that knew how to refer me to gendered healthcare services and chose to, because doctors can refuse healthcare to trans patients for ethical concerns. As of last year, we're now allowed to have our healthcare reviewed based on ethical conflict. So if I was lucky enough to have a GP that was inclined to help me and knew how to do so. And again, the reason I say knew how to is that gender healthcare is an elective subject of which GPs in their 4 years of training only do half a day on, and then anything else that they know is completely elective. So again, I keep going back to the same sentence. If I am lucky enough to go to a GP that knows how to, doesn't think I'm absolutely crackers, and has no ethical conflict and therefore is prepared to refer me to the right person, it's estimated I'd be waiting 17 years for my first appointment with the gender clinic currently. Now, the first appointment with the gender clinic, you're very, very rarely going to get any sort of sense of treatment anyway. Now, I should say that there are people in this space doing fantastic work to try and combat this. There are now pop-up gender clinics that have very strict guidelines on who can go and who can't go. There are people trying to create change in this. However, just general NHS system. First appointment, you're lucky to get a bridging prescription, if anything. You're mainly going to get treated on the second appointment. And then once I've got into that system of gender care, estimated you're looking at about 10 years until I would be able to get surgical intervention. Now, the governance documents of the NHS states that nobody will wait more than 18 weeks for a specialist appointment. So if I had tonsillitis 6 times in a year and I desperately needed to see an ear, nose and throat doctor, I wouldn't wait more than 18 weeks to see an ear, nose and throat doctor. You're looking at a couple of months max, and then you get the specialist, you get the treatment. However, due to the defunding and the lengthy wait lists, this is the state that we're now in. So we're talking about a healthcare system that has now been completely privatised mostly. I mean, it's like, it really is potluck of who gets treated on the NHS at the moment. I come back to the fact that London is the most oversubscribed area. So there are areas of the country where you could be seen, it's kind of a postcode lottery. There are 6 gender clinics throughout the UK. There are places that could be seen quicker, which brings the general estimate down to 6 years for first appointment across the country. But London's the most oversubscribed. That's what it's good to speak in hyperbole, I guess. To show, yeah.
6 or 16, it's not good enough.
There are private healthcare providers that do provide hormone treatment, surgeries, and all of that. Now, you have to have a certain economic status to be able to afford these healthcare providers, and they have now become so oversubscribed. You're looking at a 2-year wait list to be seen by a private doctor in the UK.
Wow.
So this is why when we talk about trans related topics, so often people sort of within my peer group are more keen to come back to talk about topics like this than we are keen to talk about football and boxing or whatever else archery. Everybody always wants to talk to me about sport, and I think, my goodness, can we talk about? Let's get the fundamentals in place, and then we can talk about whether I think that we should be allowed to play darts against a man or a woman. Yeah. And so that's a brief overview of the healthcare system currently. It's completely broken and is subsequently pouring gasoline onto the fire of the mental health crisis that is faced by my community. You look alongside this, and we're talking about like many people are going undiagnosed with other mental health issues because everything gets pinned to their transness, and then the rest of their mental health care is completely overlooked. So again, this draws us back to just severe isolation for many.
I'm thinking about that person listening who is considering starting their journey despite all this, unideal stuff.
Yeah.
Where is a good, and we'll talk more about this, listeners, over the series. You know what I mean? Like it's obviously you can't. It's going to evolve. One, it's going to evolve. Two, there's so much to talk about. But so that we are giving some resources, we can put them in the show notes. But there are some places where you can start your journey anyway, because once you know you're trans, you've got to sort it, right? It's not like you can just go, oh, well, I'll leave it because there's a big waiting list. So where might somebody go on that first little foray?
Again, it really does come down to sort of like a postcode lottery on this. There's a weekly clinic that runs out of 56 Dean Street called Trans Plus that runs on Wednesday afternoons, and is free to use as long as you are within a London postcode. And they also offer services like having your bloods checked, because many people are now self-medicating with hormones that they buy online. And so they've set up services where they're able to check your hormone levels and make sure that you're not doing any sort of like irreparable damage, to make sure you're doing it properly, and also to give advice and guidance, because the reality is many are turning to this method of hormone treatment. And so there's an example, and there are pop-up gender clinics, as I say, that are trying to combat this, coming up around the country. I think there's one in Liverpool. Dig into it. And what I would say outside of that is, definitely, if you are, journey of 1,000 steps, start with the first one. My advice to everyone is always connect with us as much as you can. Connect with people like yourself as much as you can. The only way we're going to get through this next, what I think is, I hate to be so doom and gloom. My first time talking with you on here, and it is doom and gloom. It is about to get worse. Significantly worse for us for a couple of years. And so again, I draw back. My advice is always, please connect with us through services such as the ones that we run. There are other fantastic charities and community organisations that just offer ways to connect with other trans people, because we do share resources with one another. I can think of an example of this. There's this Google document that was going around for years, which was basically a list of all trans-friendly GPs in the UK. And the reason it was a Google document was because it had shared access, so that people could go on, see what area they were in, and then sign up to a GP that wouldn't refuse their care. Yeah. It was kind of prohibition-level transsexualism, but I'm kind of down for that, to be honest. Yeah. That has recently been converted into a website where you can search your location. I don't know it off the top of my head. However, I had to find it for somebody a couple of weeks ago. So I'll send that over to you and you can add it to the notes.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Resources like that, you only really know about through connecting with other trans people. We are naturally, I do think as a community, when we are arms wide open for one another.
Well, this is it. And as you and I spoke about before this recording, is, Homo sapiens is about illustrating that we all live 3D lives, that actually we're not constantly wanting to just advocate for our own rights to be the people we are. It's about this is a space for people to talk about their life in general, which makes me think about all your other wonderful projects and all the other... So you're going on holiday next week?
I'm going on holiday in 3 days. It's Monday today and I go on Thursday. I'm going for 10 days to Malta for Hoopla.
Oh, of course. So we're recording this just before the Malta Hoopla. Yes. So you're going with Glyn. Glenfussel.
My best mate, Glenn.
What made me think of that is you were talking online the other day, really interestingly, about reintroducing alcohol into your life.
I was.
And it's, we often hear the story of alcohol leaving people's lives. And I wonder how it's been to sort of bring it back for you.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because it always feels quite weird to talk to people about how drinking again has been a healing experience for me. So look, I got sober and remained sober for 5 years. I was in complete tight sobriety. I worked a program. I was in NA and AA. Mm-hmm. And when I went there in 2019, I had reached the end of a couple of years where I had experienced some real hardship and trauma. I had a boyfriend that died. I went through some really rough things for a couple of years, and I responded to that in my mid-20s at the time. I responded to it by drinking loads and going out loads and just going a bit mad for a couple of years. And then when I got to the end of that, I turned to a friend who is not only in recovery, but was also like a huge spokesperson for recovery, who I think is also a mutual friend of ours as well. Fat Tony. Tony took me to my first meeting, and I sat down and I thought, I should not be here. And he said, look for the similarities, not the differences. And so I did. And now listen, recovery is a phenomenal program that helps, countless people to live a life without the use of alcohol and drugs, and it's phenomenal. My experience of it was amazing, and in essence it worked. I got sober, and I became somebody that went to recovery meetings on a daily basis for a really long time. And then I just it stopped really resonating with me, the sentiment of the whole thing, and I realized that I started working with a therapist who really helped me to understand that I am not an addict, and I actually don't display any characteristics of an addict. I don't have the compulsive behavior of somebody that is born with the disease of addiction. I don't have that. I was a traumatized person who had no framework in place of how to process anything and no real support network. I was surrounded mostly by gay men that frequent the nightclubs of Vauxhall from Thursday to Tuesday, and the only example I had around me of how to get over things was to just run away from it. And that's what I did for a couple of years. And then I was so drenched in guilt by the end of those 2 years, and so completely ashamed of myself. I started dating my now ex-husband. I just started dating him in 2019. And I think it had just become easier for me to point to the scarlet letter of addiction and say, this is the reason for the actions, for my actions, as opposed to saying, I take accountability for some of the decisions that I made and some of my behaviours during this time period. And here's how I understand myself in the reasons, of why I behaved like that. It was almost like it was easier for me to pin myself to addiction than it was to accountability. And so I worked with this therapist to understand that about myself, and also to just have a little bit more compassion for me aged 26, 27 when these things were going on, and to almost just say oh, I feel quite sorry for that person, and kind of be a bit more forgiving to myself around the guilt that I had for going crazy for a couple of years, Have
you got a budgie?
Sorry, no, I haven't. I've got a French bulldog who's insisting on chewing a toy underneath me. Go away, away.
Come on, we've got to see the dog, Dani. You can't starve us.
I've got two. Here's one. This is the.
Who's this?
This one's Miss Honey. She's the fluffy one.
Hi, Miss Honey. You're wonderful.
It was her birthday the other day.
Happy birthday.
Pearl, here. I've got one with 3 legs as well, and she's the squeaker. Oh, she's busy with the toys. Go over there. Go see Pearl. She'll make an appearance, I'm sure.
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
So look, I actually sat on that decision for. I sat on that realisation for just shy of a year. And then Glyn and I were going away for a really good friend's birthday who'd booked this house in the middle of the countryside, and there was like 30 of our mates, all the old Think the Pink lot, and, it was really fun. And all the way there to this house, I was in the car and I was with another friend of ours, and I had been explaining to her this realisation around I'm not an addict. And then I got to the house and I pulled Glyn aside. I said, I think I'm going to have a glass of wine. And he said, well, look, you are in a house of 30 people that love you in the middle of nowhere. There's very little damage that could be done here. So why don't you do it? And if anything goes wrong, we all love you enough to just let it go. But maybe you'll enjoy it. Well, turns out I loved it. And so, yeah, that was kind of like,
wow.
When I say drinking again has been healing, it's been a period of reconnecting with a lightness that I'd kind of forgotten was in me all along. I always used to say, the thing I miss the most about drink is the loss of inhibition. And, the social lubrication of it all. I've just reconnected with this lighter side of myself, this really social side over the past sort of 6 months, and I'm having a really nice time. And so, yeah, I'm going off to Malta on Thursday.
So there's drinking, and then there's also being drunk, isn't there? And they're two different things. And people in my life are in recovery, and I feel like I know a lot about it. I feel like I know something about it, I should say. And what I find really interesting in terms of hearing about it is how I sit there and I listen, and then I'm like, sorry, I just want to preface this with, if someone wants to be in recovery, they should. So this is not me sort of saying, yeah, I don't think it's necessary. But what I think is really interesting is how no matter whether you're an addict or not, alcohol is playing with fire. Right? As is drugs. It's like moderation is the hardest thing to do. It's very Moorish. Like how could anyone really manage the perfect relationship with it? You're always going to be doing a bit too much occasionally, or you know what I mean? Like that's what I find really hard, because I've had conversations about whether I'm addicted to alcohol.
Yeah.
Just to sort of kick the tires on it, because basically I'm that age group where it's like I started drinking at 13. As soon as I worked out I was gay, I was getting blackout drunk the entire time, because it was the only way to just try and cope with it. When you were talking about your experiences a second ago, I related so much to that. We are not taught any other way to work through anything that's going on for us.
Drink if you're happy, drink if you're sad.
Yeah, and so in a way, that's the feeling that I've got. And right now, I would say I'm not addicted, but I'm also open to learning more about myself, and maybe I am. You know what I mean? But it's really hard. But what I also thought was really interesting is when you were telling that story, it seemed like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed a little bit like you felt guilty about saying it. And has it been quite a kickback from the sort of recovery community?
I don't think necessarily a kickback per se. I think that it's naive to believe that the program should be implemented only in one way, and that way is supposed to be effective for absolutely everyone. And I do think that there should be space to say that one has recovered. I do think that we should be allowed to say, I feel that I have recovered. And that is where I reached. However, that is a really contentious topic within people, within the community of people that remain in recovery. They would say it's, one day at a time, and that you are always in recovery. Fine. We hold different opinions. Did I get a kickback? I wouldn't necessarily say so. I was fearful of telling there's a really good friend of mine who's in recovery, and I was scared to tell her that I had decided to drink again, because there's another friend of ours who was in recovery and went in at the same time as me. And when he started drinking again, I found it incredibly challenging. It really hurt my feelings that he'd gone back on it. And it almost sowed the seeds of doubt in me when I was in it. And I was scared that my U-turn would hurt her. Turns out she didn't actually care, thankfully. And the last person I told was Tony. And I was so fearful of letting him down. I was really scared to let him down, and that is, again, as somebody who I see as as family. And he was the last person I told, and everybody else knew apart from him. And I drank at his wedding, and I thought that he'd noticed, and it turns out he didn't. And and then we spoke a couple of weeks later, because I'd told his husband, I said, hey, is Tony mad at me because I drank at a wedding? And he was like, he has no idea. So, look, I ended up, every phone call I was having with him, I was avoiding the topic of telling him. And it was always, I could feel it in my mouth. It was like this thing I had to say, and I just couldn't get it out. And so this one day, we'd had this big, long phone call, as we always do, and then I sent him a big message, and I said, I just have to tell you, I have been so scared of revealing to you that I have been drinking for the last few months, and I feel fantastic about it, and I'm having a really nice time, and everything is well. And he called me straight away, and he said, your journey is not my journey, it is your journey, and whatever decision you make, I support you and I love you. And it was very, very, and that was, I think that's verbatim, that was like word for word. I remember it very clearly. That was a tricky one. I didn't really get too much of a kickback from other people in recovery, because I hadn't been going to meetings for quite a long time by the time I started drinking it again. I posted about it for the first time online a little while ago, and it was on a story, and it was just because I had been getting messages from people that are like, is that wine in your hand? Like, where I'd be out and about, like, uh-oh. Or like a picture would be posted and I'm surrounded by Aperol Spritz. And I'm like, oh no. So yeah, that is, I only posted it because people were curious about it, I guess.
Were people nice online?
Yeah. Do you know what? It was really well received. I think I explained it in the similar way to how I've explained it here, and I don't think that I say anything within that's like problematic. I wasn't drinking in crisis, and I sat on it for a really long time before I made the decision. When I started drinking again, I told my now ex-husband. I told him about it, and because he was 17 years sober. And I was really scared that it would hurt him also. And the first thing he said when I explained it, he went, I am so proud of you. He said, I'm so proud that you are no longer so guilty. Because I was so guilty for such a long time. I was so, it was almost
About
like Catholic guilt. Like I was such a sinner for being crazy for a couple of years. I'd had all this guilt around my actions from pre-sobriety. And he said, I just watched you beat yourself up for a couple of years in those recovery meetings, because it's so much self-reflection and looking back. And I spent a couple of years just being like, God, I'm such a horrible person. Turns out I'm all right.
Do you know, yeah, you absolutely are. And do you know, it's so interesting because Jodie Harsh has got this new book out, You Had to Be There. And it comes from a time when I was going out a lot to all the places Jodie went and all of that. Everybody get your copy from a good bookseller. And a lot of people beat themselves up about those experiences, those times in your life. Like you kind of just go, oh God, And actually Jodie, when Jodie came on the podcast, we spoke about that because she was really like amazing and sort of contrite about, she was like, I think I was a bit, I can't remember her words, but just like, I'm not very proud of my actions from those times, and it's also like that saying, if you haven't changed, you haven't grown. Like if you're not embarrassed about something you've done before, you haven't grown, So we're we're all going to feel like that about those times. And I'm also interested by the thing that you said. Sorry, you were about to say something. Go ahead.
No, I was just about to say that there's also a unifying queer experience of bloody, we find each other in clubs a lot of the time because guess what? There's not that many of us. And so the only way we can find each other is clubs. And what goes in clubs? Booze and drugs and casual sex. It's kind of the whole point that we're there. So, it's completely normal, I guess, that the people that would find each other through those means, some of them would just slip into patterns of behavior that they later go on to regret or that they have to change in order to live, So I don't feel so guilty about it anymore. I was just like, do you know what? I was like a young trans person who... I fell into London club life. My first job in London was general manager of Proud Camden. And then I went on to become general manager of Shadow Lounge, like a bazillion years ago.
Or as I call it, Ground Zero.
Literally. And so, obviously I'd end up doing loads of gear and being with loads of boys because it was my life at that time. And so,
somewhere you belonged as well, by the way.
Yeah, and
somewhere you belonged for the first time. I mean,
and guess what? Most of my closest friendships now in my mid-30s come from the formative years in those clubs. So look, there was some bad stuff that came out of it that I am happy to move on from. But also some of the best parts of my life come from those clubs. What were you going to say? You said there was something you were curious about.
Well, I just thought it was interesting that you said when another friend of yours left Sobriety and you considered, but it was before you needed it to end or something. It's like, so it's almost like you did it. It's interesting to hear you frame it, that it's not like, oh, I was doing it for 5 years and I was wrong all along. It sounds like you're like, I was doing it, I needed the 5 years off, and then I was able to re-enter kind of thing. And I think that's the thing that I don't hear discussed. And I'm not saying it should be. I'm just saying I don't hear it discussed that you can do it for a bit and then come back. Because I think as well, the problem with alcoholism and addiction in general is it is so powerful over you that if you let that into the general discourse, people would constantly drop off because it's hard enough getting people to commit. That's why they say one day at a time, because you've just got to get through the next 24 hours.
Yeah.
God, it's so interesting. And, and I also think what I'd love to say is I'd love to hear from people about all experiences on this spectrum. And so many things you've said, Dani, have been so interesting and resonated on that front. So hello at homosapienspodcast.com, at homosapiens on Instagram. This has been so lovely. What we have to do now is we look to the future. So we're doing community notice board, which is people, anything you want to recommend, like a queer business or a queer shop or anything. Is there anything that you like, that you would like to recommend?
I think I'll go camp. Yeah, it's literally a venue called Camp. Hang on, can you see?
Yes, there's a ring, camp ring.
Yeah, membership.
Love it. That's great.
All right, yeah, let's talk about camp.
Okay,
It's a proper knees up gay bar in the middle of Cliftonville in Margate. I moved to Margate 3.5 years ago, and it is the gayest place I have ever lived, and I absolutely love it here. It's populated mostly by East Londoners these days, and there's the camp is on the main road that runs through Cliftonville. Cliftonville is the area where most Londoners that move to Margate, we all live in Cliftonville, including me. And it's a tiny little bar, and they managed to do so much with such a little space. It's owned by a collective of 5 queer friends that pitched their money together and opened a bar, and it actually opened the week that I moved here. And I now DJ there once a month. Woo. And it's really fun. I really do love it there. So yeah, if you're visiting Margate, try camp, and also try Margate Arts Club, which is owned by Amy Zing, who is one of the original founders of Sink the Pink alongside Glyn. And they, between camp and Margate Arts Club, you couldn't wish for gayer times.
Brilliant. And I want to recommend Microfilm, who are a band who messaged me to say that they have a new EP, I think, coming out. So look them up at Microfilm Music on Instagram and spread the good word, because we all need more good music in our life, don't we? Never enough of it.
Never enough. Although I've recently been going back to really old disco music, almost exclusively.
The dream.
Yeah,
The
old
dream.
disco, and also sort of like 90s, sort of like pop disco, like Crystal Waters sort of stuff. That's my, like, it's all I'm listening to at the moment.
Really? Have you got any public playlists that you use?
Oh, that's a good one. Do you know what? I don't, but let me work on next time I come on. I'm going to have one.
Great, yeah, because I'll do like old disco. I'll find a lovely old disco track and then just click create playlist. You know, and it's like create radio.
Yes.
But I love it when someone has curated a list, because it's always cool.
I can tell you about a playlist that you'll love, and it's on my Spotify, and I was recommended it at a house party at God knows what time in the morning, and
Lovely.
it is it's a tea dance house party from New York, and it's like old gay disco music.
OMG.
It's really, really good. Hang on, I'm gonna send it over to you, and then you can do. Oh, there we go. Sleaze. It's called Sleaze. Disco and soul, gay morning music tea dance. I'm gonna send you the link.
So thank you.
Yeah, Sleaze. SELEAZE.
Spider.
And that's the one.
Yes.
And it's fantastic.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Right, listeners, we'll put that in the show notes as well, so everyone can have a right old gay boogie.
Knees up.
Dani, thank you for breaking your duck with us, as they say. Listeners, get in touch about everything we've spoken about. What would you like to hear from us? hello@homosapienspodcast.com, at Homo Sapiens on Instagram. Dani is on Instagram at
Dani St James.
all one word, and that's it.
All one word. St James like the park, and just as easy to get into.
Love it.
I've used that one.